Our top focus right now is, of course, the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken's visit in Israel. Well, he is in Israel with plans to discuss truce and increased flow of aid into Gaza. Blinken is expected to meet Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu today. He met Israeli President Isaac Herzog amid a renewed push for a ceasefire in Gaza. He also met with the families of American hostages in Tel Aviv who are protesting to bring back the hostages held in Gaza.
Thank you, Biden.
Thank you, Biden.
Thank you, Blinken.
Thank you, Blinken.
Thank you, Biden.
Thank you, Biden.
Thank you, Blinken.
Thank you, Blinken.
We will not rest, we will not stop until you're reunited with your brother.
Earlier, Blinken said that Israel is planning on opening a major humanitarian aid crossing into the hard-hit northern Gaza. Blinken will visit the Karem Shalom crossing and the Ashdod port in the afternoon to examine humanitarian aid flowing through Gaza. He added that he will press Netanyahu on Gaza aid measures and ceasefire talks.
Who receives and what the safe routes for delivery on the other side is also a key issue.
The Israelis have put a strong proposal on the table. They've demonstrated that they're willing to compromise. And now it's on Hamas. And no more delays, no more excuses. The time to act is now.
However, hours before he landed in Israel, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu vowed to launch a ground offensive into Gaza's southernmost town of Rafah, and that too with or without a deal to halt the fighting and the release of Israeli hostages.
No ICC action will impact Israel's ironclad determination to achieve the goals of our war with Hamas terrorists. We will destroy Hamas's military and governing capabilities in Gaza. We will release all our hostages, and we will ensure that Gaza never poses a threat to Israel again.
Netanyahu is facing pressure from far-right allies to reject a new ceasefire.
If you decide to raise a white flag and cancel the order to occupy Rafah immediately in order to complete the task of destroying Hamas and to restore security to the residents of the South and to the citizens of Israel and to return all our abducted brothers and sisters to their home, the government headed by you will have no right to exist.
Rafah is the main entry point for getting the desperately needed aid into Gaza. This is where the United Nations says 100% of the population is at severe levels of food insecurity. More than 1 million Palestinian civilians have been driven into Rafah, with many living in sprawling tent camps. Israel says Rafah is Hamas's last major stronghold in the Gaza Strip. Now, reacting to Netanyahu's UN's humanitarian chief, Martin Griffiths, said that a ground operation by Israeli troops in the southern Gaza city, in fact, of Rafah, would be a tragedy beyond words. Washington has joined calls on Israel from other countries and humanitarian organizations to spare the city. They fear that an army incursion would lead to massive civilian casualties.
Look, our views on Rafah, I think, are very well known. The president's been very clear about it. I've been clear about it and repeated it as recently as yesterday. Where our focus is right now, along with the humanitarian effort, our focus right now is on getting a ceasefire and hostages home.
According to State Department Deputy Spokesperson Vedant Patel, the United States has not seen a credible Israeli plan for a military operation in the southern Gaza city of Rafah that would address its concerns.
Continues to be the case that we have not seen a credible plan that would address the varying areas of concerns that you've heard me talk about a number of times from up here and others, primarily the ability to address the serious humanitarian concerns surrounding.
On the other hand, French Foreign Minister has told Benjamin Netanyahu that an Israeli offensive in Rafah is a bad idea and will not resolve anything in the country's fight against Hamas. France hopes for peace, prosperity and de-escalation in Gaza.
France is not abandoning Israel. It is a friend of Israel. We've had a number of political discussions over the last 3 days since I started my tour in Lebanon. I stopped off in Riyadh to have a number of political discussions over the next 48 hours with the Israeli authorities.
And for more on this, we are now joined by our correspondent, Jody Cohen, who's joining us from the all-important Erez crossing on the Israel-Gaza border. Jody, thank you so much for joining us on the broadcast. A very important trip by Antony Blinken. Tell us what's on the agenda. We know that he'll be meeting the families of the hostages there, and he will be going to the Kerem Shalom crossing and the Ashdod port. Tell us what else is on the agenda.
Absolutely. So US Secretary of State Antony Blinken, of course, was in Saudi Arabia and Jordan before coming to Israel. And this is his 7th trip to Israel since the war began. Now, on the schedule, as you said, he met with Israeli President Herzog this morning in Tel Aviv. Then he was due to go to Jerusalem to meet with Prime Minister Netanyahu and to meet with War Cabinet Minister Benny Gantz in a place called Yad Mordechai, which is in the south, which is very close to the Gaza border and was one of the communities affected on the 7th of October in Hamas's attack. He's likely to be meeting with Defense Minister Gallant and Foreign Minister Katz at some point during his trip. He's set to go to the Kerem Shalom crossing, which, like the Erez crossing, which is where I am standing now, is one of the key crossings to get aid from Israel into Gaza. That's the main commercial crossing between Israel and Gaza. He's also set potentially to go to Ashdod port. Again, that's in the south, and that is where aid is going to be going into Gaza, presumably to the new Gaza pier that's being built by the Americans there. He's met with some of the hostage families, as you said, some of the Israeli-American hostages, and he's going to be in these meetings talking about this potential ceasefire and hostage release deal that we keep on hearing about, also the planned potential Rafah operation and aid into Gaza.
Jody, this comes in the backdrop of Netanyahu just saying hours before that he will not shy away from launching a ground offensive on Rafah with or without a deal, and that Israel's resolve is ironclad. He's also under pressure from Israel's far right. At the same time, he's also under pressure from the Western countries to kind of strike a ceasefire deal and allow aid into Gaza. How much of an impact, in the backdrop of all of this, how much of an impact will Antony Blinken's visit bear on a ceasefire deal here?
So you're absolutely right. There are pressures coming from all directions. Netanyahu's facing pressure from within his own war cabinet and wider cabinet. He's facing pressure from bereaved families who are calling for a Rafah operation because they want to target Hamas and make sure that security is returned to Israel, but also pressure, understandably, from the hostage families, many of whom are also saying that Israel should do everything it possibly can to achieve a deal. Now, Israel has said that it won't go into Rafah. It will delay the planned operation in Rafah to target the final Hamas battalions there if Hamas releases some of the 133 hostages who are still being held in Gaza as part of this deal. On the other hand, Israel has said that if Hamas rejects the latest offer, then they would move ahead in Rafah. Now, an Israeli delegation was in Cairo last night. We were hearing that was to get Hamas's response, although we haven't yet heard what that response is. The US and UK have said that Israel's offer was extraordinarily generous. But according to reports, we are hearing that Hamas is demanding amendments. So that's not yet been verified. We're waiting to hear further news on that front.
Jody, you are at the all-important Erez crossing and talking about aid. Do we have any timeline as to when the first tranche would be getting in there?
So Israel has said that it's going to be opening 3 crossings into northern Gaza as well as the crossings into southern Gaza. The UN's top humanitarian official, Sigrid Kaag, has noted the steps by Israel to boost Gazan aid, and White House spokesperson Kirby has said that aid to Gaza has increased dramatically, but there are still challenges. Israeli government spokesperson David Mencer has talked about 700 trucks waiting on the Gazan side of the border for the UN to collect. The IDF spokesperson Daniel Hagari has talked about coordinating aid being complicated enough, but complicated further by Hamas's ongoing fire, including, he said, towards aid convoys. And just last week, the IDF said that mortars were fired at UN officials touring the site of the pier being built by the US that's being defended by the Israel Defense Forces. And they say that they're working with the international organizations to solve all of these challenges.
Thank you, Dodi, so much for joining us on the broadcast with those details.
Thank you.
For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.